Virginia, 1864. The American Civil War has ground to a bloody, exhausting halt. But 15 meters underground, a secret fuse is about to be lit. Picture this. You've spent almost a month digging a tunnel 15 meters underground. Right above your head, hundreds of enemy soldiers are going about their day. They're standing guard, eating breakfast, talking to each other, completely unaware that a group of miners is slowly making its way beneath their feet, and you, holding nothing but a lantern, are getting ready to light the fuse on one of the biggest bombs anyone has ever buried in a battlefield. In just a few minutes, the ground is going to explode. Not just shake, explode. The blast will be so powerful that men, cannons, trees, and tons of earth will be thrown into the air. Now here's the crazy part. The plan actually works. The explosion goes exactly the way it was supposed to, and somehow, they still lose. So how does a plan this brilliant end in complete disaster? Well, that's exactly what happened at the Battle of the Crater. By the summer of 1864, the American Civil War had already dragged on for more than 3 years. Both sides were exhausted. Thousands of soldiers had already been killed, but outside the city of Petersburg, Virginia, the war had reached a deadlock. Miles of trenches stretched across the landscape. Every attack ended the same way. The Union Army would charge, the Confederates would hold their ground, and hundreds of men would die for almost no gain. It felt like nobody could move. The question was simple. How do you break through a defense like that? For a while, nobody had an answer. Until one officer suggested something so unusual that most people thought he was joking. What if we go underneath them? The idea came from Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pleasants. He commanded the 48th Pennsylvania Infantry. Now, this wasn't just any regiment. Before the war, many of these soldiers had worked as coal miners. Digging tunnels wasn't new to them. It had been their job. Pleasants looked at the Confederate trenches and thought, if we can't get past them, why not go under them? Most commanders thought the idea was ridiculous. Dig a tunnel beneath enemy lines without being discovered? During a war, it sounded impossible, but Pleasants believed his men could do it, so they grabbed their tools and started digging. Days turned into weeks. The tunnel grew longer and longer. It was dark, hot, cramped. Every swing of a pickaxe risked collapsing the ceiling. And after a while, they ran into another problem. They were running out of air. Today we'd solve that with electric fans. Back then, they had to get creative. They built a fire near the entrance of the tunnel. As the hot air rose, fresh air was naturally pulled through the tunnel. It was a simple trick, but it worked incredibly well. And somehow, the Confederates never realized what was happening beneath them, whether they didn't hear the digging or simply ignored it. We'll probably never know. But that mistake was about to change everything. After weeks of digging, the tunnel was finally finished. At the very end, the Union packed nearly 4 tons of black powder beneath the Confederate position. Everything was ready. All they had to do now was light the fuse. At around 4:45 in the morning, the fuse was lit. Union soldiers waited. 1 minute passed. Nothing. Another minute. Still nothing. The fuse had gone out. At that moment, 2 volunteers made a decision that could easily have killed them. They climbed back into the tunnel. If the explosives went off while they were inside, there would be no escape. They crawled through the darkness, found the dead fuse, lit it again, and rushed back out. Then, the ground began to shake. At first, just a little, then more. And then, everything exploded. The earth burst into the sky. A massive column of dirt shot upward. Cannons flew through the air. Trees were ripped from the ground. Entire sections of trench disappeared. and hundreds of Confederate soldiers were launched into the air in seconds. People who witnessed it later said it looked less like an explosion, and more like the Earth itself had erupted. The Union soldiers couldn't believe what they were seeing. The enemy line was gone. They had done it. Or so they thought. Because this is where everything fell apart. The original plan was actually pretty smart. The attacking soldiers weren't supposed to run into the crater, they were supposed to move around it, push through the broken defenses, and capture the high ground. Simple, except that's not what happened. For reasons historians still argue about today, the soldiers charged straight into the crater. At first, it probably felt like the safest place to be. The giant hole protected them from enemy bullets. But then they realized something. Getting into the crater was easy. Getting back out was a completely different story. The walls were a slippery mess of loose clay and body parts. Men were screaming, climbing over each other just to get a breath of air. Hundreds of men became trapped together inside one enormous muddy pit. Meanwhile, the Confederate soldiers recovered from the shock. They rushed to the edge of the crater, looked down, and found thousands of Union troops packed together with nowhere to run, like fish in a barrel. From above, they opened fire. The crater quickly turned into a brutal killing ground. The men who had survived one of the biggest explosions of the Civil War were now trapped by their own success. By the time the fighting was over, around 3,800 Union soldiers had been killed, wounded, or captured. The Confederates lost about 1,500 men. The tunnel had worked, the explosion had worked, the engineering had worked. What failed was the leadership. Today, military schools still study the Battle of the Crater, not because it was the biggest explosion of the war, but because it teaches one unforgettable lesson. A brilliant plan can still fail. If the people carrying it out make the wrong decisions at the most important moment. Sometimes, a battle isn't won by the biggest explosion, it's won or lost in the few minutes that come after the smoke clears. Petersburg remained a bloody stalemate. But thousands of miles away, another Union mastermind was preparing a brutal march that would cut the Confederacy in half. Sherman's March to the Sea. But that is a story for the next episode. If you enjoyed this story, let me know what you think in the comments. And if you're into the lesser known but absolutely incredible stories from history, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.